Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving into how a team of engineers managed to save history's most famous architectural mistake from the brink of absolute disaster. I am incredibly excited to share this with you because we aren't just looking at a pretty building today. We are unpacking an epic 800-year-long battle against gravity. We're going to explore the genius, the mind-boggling blunders, and the ultimate masterstroke that kept this iconic tower from toppling over. All right, let's jump right in. Picture this, it's 1990. And the Italian government is staring down a genuinely terrifying number, a 5.5-degree tilt. That number made them realize the world's most famous tower was literally inches away from a catastrophic collapse. And the threat was real. Just a year prior, in 1989, a similarly old tower in the city of Pavia suddenly collapsed without warning. So, absolutely terrified of a repeat tragedy, authorities completely locked down the Pisa monument. They barred all tourists, and in a truly desperate bid to shed weight, they even climbed up and stripped the massive bells out of the top chamber. The building was officially on life support.
Section 1. The Dangerous Crisis of 1990. Section 2. The Ancient Truth of Marshy Land. To really understand how they reached that crisis point, we've got to rewind all the way back to the year 1173. The people of Pisa wanted this grand, imposing bell tower, but the original ancient builders completely missed a crucial detail. They chose a site sitting right on top of soft, marshy silt left behind by the shifting Arno River. I mean, they were essentially building a heavy stone skyscraper on a giant wet sponge. In 1173, they laid a foundation just 3 meters deep, a totally fatal miscalculation. By 1178, as they reached the 3rd floor, the incredible weight of all that marble caused the soft river soil to compress unevenly, and the tower started to sink. But then, in a stroke of brilliant historical irony, a century-long war broke out with neighboring states, completely pausing construction until 1272. And you know what? That warfare actually saved the tower. The 100-year pause gave the soil underneath time to naturally compress and settle. Had they just kept building, the whole thing would have collapsed right then and there.
Section 3. The century's biggest hack. So, when a new team of architects finally picked the project back up in 1272, they had a leaning base to deal with. But instead of tearing it down and starting over, they attempted what has to be the century's biggest architectural hack. To compensate for the tilt, they tried to literally force the tower straight by building the leaning south side taller. They deliberately used larger stones on the south and smaller ones on the north. By the time they finally reached the bell chamber in 1360, which is nearly 2 centuries after they first broke ground, things were so incredibly uneven, they had to build 4 steps on the north side and 6 steps on the south just to make the top look somewhat level to the naked eye. But, well, physics is pretty unforgiving, right? That extra weight didn't magically fix the lean. In fact, it just pushed the soft, spongy soil down even further. Adding all that uneven weight resulted in what's known as the banana effect. No joke, if you look closely at the structure today, it isn't just leaning in a straight, rigid line, it's actually curved. It bows outward like a banana. So those ancient engineers inadvertently took a simple sinking problem and made it significantly more complex.
Section 4. Failed Attempts to Fix.
Over the next few centuries, that tilt steadily worsened, hitting 4.5 degrees by 1817. And this triggered a modern era of disastrous interventions, where pretty much every single attempt seemed to make the tower even angrier. Take 1834, for example. An architect decides to dig a nice little walkway around the base so people can admire the foundation. Boom, the tower sinks another 0.25 degrees. Fast forward to 1934, and the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini decides he's going to fix it. He orders 90 tons of heavy concrete to be injected straight into the foundation to straighten it out. But that massive weight just drove the south foundation deeper into the mud, violently pushing the tilt to a full 5 degrees. This entire history of cascading failures is exactly why that desperate 1990 team we talked about earlier had to pile 600 tons of incredibly ugly lead counterweights onto the north side. They just needed to halt the movement and buy themselves some time to think. Now, buying time led to a pretty audacious idea in 1995. The engineers came up with a high-stakes plan that they called the liquid nitrogen fix. The overall idea was to drill down 40 meters to solid bedrock and firmly anchor the tower with steel cables. But because drilling straight into that marshy soil would release trapped water and cause immediate disastrous sinking, they decided to pump -200 degrees Celsius liquid nitrogen directly into the ground. The goal was to freeze the water inside the soil, locking it completely solid so they could drill safely. I mean, it sounds like absolute sci-fi brilliance, right? Well, actually, scratch that. It backfired spectacularly. Think about what happens when you accidentally leave a glass bottle of water in the freezer. Water expands when it freezes. So the newly frozen soil expanded rapidly, heaving the north side of the tower upwards and severely worsening the tilt on the south side. Absolute panic ensued. The engineering team had to frantically pile on 300 more tons of those ugly lead weights just to stop the tower from tipping over right then and there. The situation post-nitrogen was so dire that strict calculations revealed a terrifying new reality. If the weight on the leaning side increased by just 7% more, just 7%, the structural integrity of the stone itself would fail, and the entire 800-year-old monument would shatter completely into a million pieces. They were literally out of room for error.
Section 5. Under excavation. A masterstroke.
With their backs totally against the wall, the engineers went back to the drawing board and devised one final, unbelievably delicate masterstroke. It wasn't about adding heavy weight or freezing the ground this time, it was about surgical removal. This was a true high-wire act. They were incredibly cautious, even practicing on a 7-meter concrete model nearby first. The steps were super precise. Step 1, safely secure the massive tower with heavy steel cables. Step 2, drill diagonal guide holes into the high north side. Step 3, extract minuscule, highly calculated amounts of soil from those holes. And Step 4, just let gravity do the work, allowing the tower to naturally and gently settle backwards into the tiny little gaps they'd created in the earth. Talk about a nail-biting execution. They started with a tiny 1-meter test area first. Thankfully, it worked flawlessly, reducing the angle by 0.1 degrees. Breathing a massive sigh of relief, they scaled the whole operation up to 41 drills over a 2-meter area. Bit by bit, day by day, removing exactly enough soil, they safely pulled the massive tower back. They successfully reduced the tilt from that terrifying 5.5 degrees down to a much safer, much more stable 3.97 degrees. Section 6. Why will the tower remain leaning? Now, seeing how perfectly that soil extraction method worked, you really have to ask, why not just make the tower perfectly straight? The engineering team absolutely had the capability to pull it all the way back to a perfect 0 degrees. But the authorities stepped in with a pretty sharp realization. A perfectly straight Tower of Pisa wouldn't exactly be a global tourist attraction, would it? It would just be another bell tower in Italy. So they intentionally halted the extraction process to preserve its 800-year-old leaning identity, making sure the local tourism economy wouldn't just vanish overnight. The monument was finally reopened to an ecstatic public on December 15, 2001, after being closed off for over a decade. And today, it is beautifully stabilized. A massive subterranean concrete ring now permanently secures the foundation. On top of that, engineers installed 3 high-tech drainage wells on the north side. These ensure that the underground soil moisture remains perfectly equalized on both sides at all times, meaning the tower won't ever sink unevenly again. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with kind of a fun question to chew on. What other historical monuments out there owe their legendary fame entirely to the ancient engineering blunders that almost destroyed them? The Tower of Pisa is this amazing reminder that sometimes our greatest, most iconic cultural triumphs are actually just beautifully salvaged mistakes. Thank you so much for exploring this incredible architectural journey with me. Keep wondering, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.